everybody. Welcome to Three Cocktails and a Book. I'm Misty Malloy.
I'm Renee Rose.
I'm Tess Summers.
And today we have Lyz Kelley, author Lyz Kelley. She's amazing. Welcome, Lyz. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, thank you so much. Today's cocktail is a lemon drop, and it is Lyz's favorite cocktail. Lyz, can you tell us what is in the cocktail?
Well, I put lemon and simple syrup and, fresh squeezed lemon. So, and then some vodka, but one of my secret ingredients is vanilla vodka. So it takes that edge off of the lemons just so slightly. And it's one of my favorites. And of course, my rim is sugared. So great summer drink, but one of my favorites. So
yeah, it's really good. I love it. And I was looking up recipes too, and I noticed that you can actually use like the lemon vodka also. I just had regular vodka in mine, but it could be a fun variation to choose. So excellent.
Yeah, when I don't have vanilla vodka, I actually put vanilla in it, so it sort of looks dirty. It doesn't look this pretty, but I thought for our day to day that I would do a pretty one instead of dirty one. Making a dirty vodka,
a dirty lemon drop.
Dirty lemon drop.
No, I decided to do a clean one, right?
Yeah, exactly. It has a lot of lemon drops in there. This is delicious. It's really good. I think I need to practice with the combination of the sweet and the sour a little bit more. I feel like mine's just like, it needs a little more sweetness to it. But I really okay, so thanks again and cheers everybody. Let's do a quick cheers for this episode. All right. So Lyz, you write books about everyday heroes. What inspired you to start writing about everyday heroes?
I guess it was just when I was a little girl. I had so many occasions where there were people in my life that came into my world and just helped. I was just so fortunate that people came in and just helped. And I remember one gentleman helped my family. I don't even know his name. I don't remember what he looks like, but I will never, ever, ever forget him. He helped my family when we needed help most. And I wanted to explore those traits of everyday heroes, people that don't think of themselves as heroes, but that in their own way help somebody, and they might not even know it. That they just have this heart of helping people and helping community and putting themselves out there and stopping and fixing when something's wrong. And my husband is Special Forces, and he has a motto in his military unit that is never pass a fault. And that might sound a little strange to some people, but the idea of never pass a fault is never pass up something that you see that there's something wrong and that you can fix it. And that just sort of resonated with me. And when I was looking at all of the books that I write and everything that I've written since I was a little girl, it all includes everyday heroes and telling their stories. And I want to be an everyday hero. So it just is the perfect solution for me to be that everyday hero, write my books that people are drawn to, and be able to put those everyday heroes on the page. So that's why I write them.
I love it.
Love it.
So your first series, Elk Ridge, is romantic suspense. How did you come up with the idea for those stories?
Oh, this is a fun one. So I lived in Colorado for the longest time, and my great-great-grandfather was the first licensed architect in Colorado. So he had all of these plans of Colorado's, of the mines and everything like that. And he actually built the Central City Opera House. And it is built actually on top of a riverbed. But he knew all the mines around that area. And when you come from Colorado, you sort of hear stories about people growing marijuana in these underground caverns. And I started thinking about well, what happens since marijuana is now legalized in Colorado? What happens to all these underground caverns? Because they're no longer needed, right? So I was talking to an FBI agent actually in Philadelphia, and I said, here's my idea for a story. And so I laid it all out and everything. And it included these underground caverns and this big idea in this very small town. And he said, oh my gosh, that could really happen. And he goes, this is the best story that I've ever heard from an author, because I get asked all the time. He goes, this could really be it. And so he's like, well, how are you going to present it? And I said, well, it's going to be like a game of Clue. Every book is going to be from that couple, that hero and heroine, their point of view. So everybody has a little piece of the puzzle, so that you're not going to solve the puzzle until the last book, the book 4, which is Rescued in the series. And he's like, oh my gosh, I want to read that book. So yeah, that's sort of how it all came about. And I think the scariest thing for me is I think I was ready to publish book 2 or book 3 when there was this major arrest in Colorado, and it was all laid out for the things that were actually in my book. And I was like, I did not do that. I did not. No. But anyway, so obviously my FBI friend actually talked to some of his DEA agents and some of the sheriffs in Colorado, and sort of looked into my idea that actually was real.
Crazy.
That's crazy.
Happen.
I know, isn't that crazy?
You know, I mean, I feel like there's just.
Well, because he kept asking me, how did you come up with this idea? And I was laying out all these plans, and he says, you know, we sort of asked like James Rawlings and, you know, all of these guys to come to the Pentagon and sort of problem solve for us, because you guys all are researchers and you know how to get out of trouble. And so he says, authors have a really creative mind. And I was like, yes, we do.
I love it.
That's great. Wow, that's amazing. And so you have to read all 4 books, right? To kind of figure out.
And so here's the thing, and this is what I tell people. I know that some people like to read the last book and then go back and find all the clues. And some people like to read the first book and then find the clues as they go along to find out if their idea was right or not. So you can read Rescued and find out how it ends and then go find the clues, or you can read Blinded, which is the first book, and then see if you're right by the time you get to Rescued. And that's only book 4. And then I did a couple more follow-up on that. But there is a box set with all the books in there. And then there's a couple extra books that I threw in there as a bonus for the box set.
Oh, that's really awesome. I think I'm the kind of person, I like to read the very last thing, and I hate surprises. And so sometimes if I'm watching a show on Netflix or whatever, I like to go on like the internet and be like, what happens at the end? Just because that way I feel like I'm protecting my heart, you know, because I'm like, I don't know if somebody dies, I'm gonna be really upset. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I do that all the time, and it drives my husband bonkers.
Yeah, so they're all out. So no matter what type of personality you are, right, you can go in and you can find those clues in each one of the books. But yeah, so it's sort of fun. It's like a game of clues, but you know, sort of like those puzzles that you get at New Year's. We used to always do these puzzles where you read the whole thing, then you have to put the puzzle together to solve the mystery. It's one of those things.
Very fun. Yeah, it's awesome.
So the first book in the series, like you mentioned, is Blinded, and it's about a blind woman named Mara. Am I saying that right?
Yep, Mara.
And so how did this character in this book come about?
Oh, this is a great story from an author perspective, sort of give you insight into the book. So I was a new author, and I was taking CJ Lyon's course on writing, trying to be a better writer. And one of the things that was a challenge is that most writers write from a visual point of view. So you see things, you possibly hear things, but she challenged us to write from our different senses. And part of the exercise was, what if my character was blind and couldn't see? And so I really challenged myself to write a character from a perspective that couldn't see things, couldn't define a scenery or anything like that, that had to do it from a perspective of feeling things and hearing things and anticipating things. So I wrote this 25,000 word exercise when I was at this retreat. And I had a couple friends read it and they're like, oh, you have to write this book. It has to be written. And so it was really set in Philadelphia at the time. And I had Philadelphia friend said, you've got all the culture wrong. You've got all that stuff wrong. And so when I moved to Colorado and started thinking about this bigger book, I was like, you know, I can create that in a small town because I love small towns. And I can put this person in a small town where she's going to be comfortable. She's going to know the streets. She's going to know the people. She's going to know her surroundings. She's going to be really comfortable in what she does. And she's going to be able to thrive there and be confident and really mature in this setting, which created that 65, 70,000 word book that it eventually ended up being.
And then I think you also had mentioned before that you had actually gotten a letter from a reader about this book. And so that was like just such a interesting story.
Yeah, I think in every author's career that I know, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but there's a day in our career that we think, am I a good enough writer? And why am I doing this? And
just one day.
Well, yeah, maybe more than one day. But you know, it's like you question, am I making a difference? Am I a good enough writer? And is anybody ever going to read anything that I write? And I spend hours and hours and hours doing this. You know, we spend 12, 14 hours at our computer writing, right? So I was at this period in my life thinking, you know, maybe, you know, I'm dyslexic. So writing for me is really, really hard. So really, should I really even be doing this? And I think sometimes I believe in the state of grace where the world gives you what you need when you need it. And in popped this letter from a reader. Blinded is the only book that I've ever put in audio. And I've put it in audio because the character is blind, right? And this reader had actually listened to the audio and she had sent me this letter. And I was actually walking into the kitchen and I was crying and my husband's like, are you okay? And I'm like, I don't know. And I turned the computer around and let him read this letter. And it was, Mara is blind because she was on her way to a football game when a drunk driver hit her father's car and killed her mother, her father, and her sister. And she hit the back of her head, and that's where your visual is the back of the head. And she knew that when she woke up, body broken, that she was eventually going to go blind. And I researched it to the nth degree, so I know that this actually can happen. So when I get this letter, this reader said to me, I thought no one else in the world would understand what I've gone through. A drunk driver crossed the middle of the lane. My husband, my 3 children were all gone. I woke up from a coma and I knew that my 4-year-old was injured seriously. And the doctors told me that I was going to go blind. And I thought no one in this world would ever understand what I went through. And I'm going to choke up, sorry. But when I read your book, I knew that there was at least one person in this world that understood what I went through. And you created this beautiful, confident character that was just like, she knew she was a rag doll because she had so many pins in her body. She knew that she was a rag doll and that no one else would love her. But then there's this guy that comes along and loves her for who she is, flaws and all. And she said, you wrote my story.
That is so beautiful. And I feel like,
Right.
like you touched her life so much. Like she will always, like always remember that.
Well, those days that come along that I'm thinking, well, am I going to make a difference? I never have those days again, because I know that my writing has made a difference to one person, and that's all that matters.
That's very awesome.
Love it.
And thank you, Dad. That's beautiful. And so you have two other series, the Secret series and the Silver series. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Sure. Well, my Secret series is just actually two books, The Doctor's Secret and The Billionaire's Secret. And these two books are about some fairly interesting topics. I really like to explore some really challenging topics. So Billionaire's Secret is written, I did a lot of research on women's shelters in New York and homeless shelters in New York. And that's really what this secret is that this amazing man has a secret, and he really wants to help the women of New York. And so that's what this one is about. And the other one is Doctor's Secret. And this book almost never was published because an editor in New York wanted me to change the whole book. And so I shelved it for the longest time. And I think readers now, if they read my stuff, this is one of their favorite books because there's a lot of secrets in this book. But at the end of the day, it's about babies that are given up, are surrendered to hospitals. I used to work in a hospital system, and babies, for a safe haven babies, you can give them up to a police department or a fire department or a hospital. And it's about safe haven babies and the care that a hospital gives them once they are surrendered to a hospital. So that's the underlining theme with a romance set on top of it. And the hero and the heroine are sort of, it's an enemies to lovers type of book where they're at odds, but they're really, their essence is that the fact that they love children and they want to do the right thing for the children. They just have different points of view for that. And then my second series, which is the series that I really listened to my readers, and my readers were saying, I want this, I want this, I want this. This is my Silver series. And I started writing, they're sort of, these are just sort of draft copies, but I started writing small town, over 40 mature romances that are sweet. And that's really, I listened to my readers, that's what they wanted. And so I was like, I'm gonna create it for you. So if you think of a Love Boat type of thing where people come together and they meet and they have their sort of love, I'm just in a resort, a very fancy resort instead of on a boat. But that's my series that I get to play with in this world. So I've been writing a whole bunch of books in those series. So that's where I'm going right now.
That's great. I love reading books like that. They're just like feel-good books. Like you finish reading it and you are thinking, I want to read the next books. I felt so good after I read.
One of the current books that I just read, Gloria 67. It's in the Sweet Romance Anthology that was just released, doing really well. But Gloria 67 and Walter 69, First Love. So it's really fun writing those characters that have so much baggage and so much life left to live that they deserve that love.
Yeah.
So
nice
sweet.
Stories, I'm sure.
That's great.
Yeah, that's great.
So seems like you like to write really complex characters. What was your hardest character to write?
Oh, good question. I think for me, I'm going to go back to Doctor's Secret. I think it was McKenzie. McKenzie is a very, should I do that one? No, I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to change my mind. I'm going to do this one. So I'm going to do Sam in this book. And I think I'm going to do Sam. And the reason that I'm going to do Sam is that Sam is actually in a wheelchair. So I wrote a character that's in a wheelchair. And of course, I'm able-bodied. And doing that work was intensive because I always want to be very true to my characters. I want to understand them, their physical limitations, their mental limitations, their goals, their inspirations, their whatever. Because I always write positive, you know, I never write negative, but everybody has a flaw. And so I reached out to nurses and therapists and watched videos, and I did my research to the nth degree. I even reached out to a couple of Olympians that are Paralympians to give me advice on how to write this character. I talked to another author whose niece was in a horrific car accident it found herself in a wheelchair and looking for love and found love and is married. So I think that is one of the things that I pride myself on, is writing these not so usual characters, you know, blind characters in wheelchairs, things that you wouldn't normally see in a romance novel.
Love it. Awesome.
So obviously your characters are super complex, but who was your favorite to write? Or which was your favorite?
So this one was the most complex. I will then go back to McKenzie. And I think McKenzie's, I love her because she's a top executive. You would think that she has a perfect world. But her love is of these children, and she's a rocker in this hospital system, and she finds her bliss rocking these babies. And one of the things that, well, her secret, I shouldn't really tell you this, but don't tell anybody, but her secret's that she can't have children, right? And so she's able to take care of all these babies, and she fights like crazy for all these babies because she can't have children. And she's sort of like me in that way, because I was never able to have children. So I was able to explore that self-exploration of a person who adores children, because I do, but I was never able to have them. So I got to explore that joy of being with children, and that also that hurt of never being able to have them.
So she's personal to you.
Yeah, she is. She's flawed and wounded and smart and savvy and kind, and yeah, I'm wounded all at the same time.
Those are like the most fun and like the most satisfying to write. So what's next for you? Are you working on next or right now?
Well, I'm working on my mature, my sweet romance, my mature. But I've also had, one of the reasons that I really started writing as a dyslexic writer was to write this epic fantasy sci-fi that's been in my head since I was 8 years old, right? And so, and I was scared to write it. It was terrifying to write it. And I started writing it when I was 40 and was like, it's flat and uninteresting, and I just don't have the skill sets to write this. So I really spent the last 16 years trying to hone my craft and learn my craft well enough so that I could do my epic fantasy and create that world building. Because as writers, we know how hard world building is. So I really have spent the last 16 years learning how to write that book that's been in my head since I was 8. So I'm
excited to read it. I mean, I am such a sci-fi fantasy. I love those books. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and we're so glad that we found a new Tucson hottie to be part of our group.
Definitely.
You ladies are amazing. I love all your writing, and I can't wait to see what we do this year. 2021 is going to be our year. Right?
Awesome. I think we should cheers to that.
Cheers to that.
Here we go. It's a toast to us.
All right.
2021, our year. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
And we are 3 cocktails at a book. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for watching. Mwah!